Welcome back to Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Today we want to continue our deep dive into the genius of Ken Adam. We strip back the veneer of 1960s espionage to expose how brutalist triangles and oppressive circular skylights weaponize architecture against our heroes. We analyze the sharp, jagged angles of Ken Adams' sets to prove that geometry dictates morality, transforming concrete bunkers into psychological battlegrounds where visual symmetry signals absolute totalitarian villains. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
And today we'll talk about geometry, a subject I hated in high school. How about you, Tom?
Wasn't my favorite either, but how did you come up with that description there?
Yeah.
You were talking about concrete bunkers, psychological battlegrounds, using oppressive. Wow, you got geometric terms in there that I never would have thought about, and I haven't thought about since high school.
Yeah, well, geometry here, Tom. See, it offers us a unique angle.
Oh, jeez.
Come on. Yeah.
Oh, come on.
In studying spy movies. So that's pretty cool. All right.
Okay, now if we're going to do this, and you said that we're going to talk about the genius of Ken Adam here, we have to remember that we just had a special guest with us in an episode with Sir Christopher Frayling. Now, he's the British educationalist and writer known for his study of popular culture and his books on Ken Adam. So we wanted to continue that thought of what we talked about with Christopher Frayling and really focus in on the geometry piece of Ken Adams' design.
Yeah, so we're decoding something that most viewers see, but rarely consciously notice.
That's true.
The shape of evil, not the villain, not the gadgets, not even the plot. The geometry, those giant control rooms, those impossible underground headquarters, those vast concrete chambers, those metallic command centers that seem too large for any human being. We're talking about villain lairs.
Wait, it's not just the lair. There's something about geometry that's affecting us as we're watching this. Let's keep going, man.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, specifically the hidden language of villain lairs during the Cold War era. Because really, from the 1960s to the 1970s, production designers weren't simply building sets. They were building visual arguments, arguments about power, arguments about control, arguments about technology, and perhaps, most importantly, arguments about fear. At the center of this story is one man, Ken Adam. All right.
Boy, that's putting a lot on him.
Yeah, well, and he handles it well.
All right, so by the end of this episode, you're never going to look at a Bond villain headquarters or any villain's headquarters the same way again.
Right.
Modern audiences with the higher resolution TVs and devices are rediscovering the 1960s and 70s sets.
Yeah, right.
And the high resolution lets us highlight the intentionality behind every concrete slab and steel beam. The shift from Gothic castles to mid-century industrialism mirrors the era's transition from supernatural horror to the tangible threat of nuclear annihilation.
Yeah, establishing the core thesis that in the world of classic espionage, an architect is as much a weapon designer as a chemist or an assassin. So this is what we're going to talk about.
So is Ken Adam Q?
Yeah, he's Q in a lot of ways, really. When you think about it, we talk about Ken's upbringing with Sir Christopher Frayling and how that experience appears all over his Bond set. We know his villain lairs often resemble monumental state architecture, not castles and Gothic castles, like you said, and homes and whatever. It's institutions, power centers. His sets are filled with massive scale, strong angles, elevated platforms, endless depth, and brutalist influences.
All right, well, notice something interesting here. Most Bond villains don't sit among the people. These sets change that. The villain literally sits above people.
Yeah.
And this geometry establishes a hierarchy. The room lets you know who's in charge.
Yeah.
Think about something as mundane as a TV talk show. Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Craig Ferguson, they were all seated higher physically than the guest. You know the host is in charge in those situations, and that ties back to what Ken Adam was doing with his villains. The villain is almost always seated higher than everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, Ken Adam himself described his production design as a heightened sense of reality and larger than life. That's why rooms are impossibly large, beyond normal scope. Ceilings sweep and soar. Angles are extreme and visible. And lighting is dramatic and sculptural, like a piece of art, really. He
Boy,
wanted the audience.
you're on a linguistic roll today. I love all the illusions you're doing here.
But I mean, it's visual. This is visual art at its best, right? He wanted the audience to feel small, the same way Bond should feel when entering a villain's domain. And he delivered on that. I mean,
Well, I don't think it's just the audience is feeling small. Think about the room in Dr. No that I'm sure we're going to talk about when we get into some of these geometry stuff. That room with the oval ceiling, it didn't just make the audience feel small, it made Professor Dent look and feel small as well. So here he's using the geometry and the set design to really lure both of us into the concept of smallness. Through the vastness of the set.
Yep.
And so we think we also have to look at the difference between what Ian Fleming wrote and then how Ken Adam did the design work of the sets, because he changed things.
Oh, yeah.
Because what Ian Fleming wrote in his novels, many of the villain headquarters were surprisingly practical. They were described well, but they were practical. And that works for a novel. Dr. No has a facility. Goldfinger has operations. Blofeld has bases. But they weren't necessarily these big, gigantic architectural statements. The movies changed that. And why? Because film is visual. The audience needs to feel power before the villain even speaks. We have to know that's the person in charge. The villain's environment lets us know everything. When we see a cramped room, it suggests weakness. If we see a luxurious room, it suggests success. Massive geometric space suggests domination. And that's different than the novels.
Yeah. So in these cases, really, Ken Adam made the set become a character. and nobody understood creating these set characters better than Ken Adam.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ken Adam was necessary to bring Fleming's practicality onto the big screen. Everything has to be bigger than what Fleming wrote, because in the novels, we see things in our own mind's eye. So if Ian Fleming writes, Dr. No has a facility, Ken Adam says, well, it's not just a facility. It's this, right? And so he has to bring a mindset to us instead of just what we might determine when we're reading. So Fleming writes the words. When we're reading the words, we get a picture in our mind based on what Fleming's words were. Sure. Ken Adam had to take that and blow it up and make it big and really have an impact. And that's what he did. And how did he do it, Dan?
I mean, he wasn't just designing sets. I mean, there's a ton of set designers. He was using geometry, that's the focus here, as visual psychology. Like we kind of are talking about, we're talking all about.
Okay, I missed something in geometry class.
Yeah, well, I was psyched out in geometry class, but that's a different story. All right. He didn't just imagine these spaces in a vacuum. He did a lot of research. Tom, you remember when you spoke to the curator at the University of Iowa about Richard Maybaum's collection that they have, how much research Maybaum did and how he saved everything for later ideas. Remember that conversation?
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating because much of that stuff that he had there was really mundane, but he researched it and he'd pick a clip and he'd say, okay, we might use this later. And then he went on. It was really cool.
And check out that episode. It's a great one. Now here, Adam did the same thing. He researched military bases, nuclear facilities, industrial architecture, modernist buildings. And he did all of that.
Well, and the cool thing is his work there, they've archived it, and it's got over 5,600 drawings. I mean, you've got the drawings, the research photos, concept sketches, clearly demonstrating how he blended real engineering with fantasy and scaled things up. And he did that because he did the research. He could scale things up.
Yeah, and that's why his sets feel real and believable and really at the same time fantastical. That's a talent. Now let's look at the visual. We're talking about the visual psychology here. So we're going to look deeply now into these shapes that Ken Adam used to create this visual psychological impact that he has on the characters in the movie and us as viewers. The shapes, lines, and spatial arrangements of villain Lairs often told the audience what kind of villain they were dealing with before the villain even spoke a word. So, brilliant stuff.
Yeah, and we should also remember that we're talking about the 1960s when a lot of this work was done. In 1960 movies, a room's shape can actually tell you how evil a person is.
Yeah.
So if we deconstruct the intentional triangles and oppressive circular skylights of Ken Adams and other iconic sets, we can discover how cold geometry that we often see but ignore in a deep way was basically weaponized to turn simple wood, concrete, walls, or ceilings into a psychological battlefield where a statement is being made visually. Okay,
Yeah.
This might be a little over the top in my description here, but the concept holds. You can use geometry to set the stage for what you're looking at. And space and light were Adam's comfortable domains to work in.
Yeah, and it was a unique and massive way of looking at things that Ken Adam had this talent for. Here are some good examples of what we're talking about. We know Ken Adam worked on 8 James Bond movies: Dr. No, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker.
Yeah, hang on a second. Let's before we get to those, let's start with a few non-James Bond movies, because I assume many of our listeners will know that Adam worked on those. But let's talk about some of the stuff he did using the concept of geometry that weren't in the Bond films, and then come back to the Bond movies.
Yeah, because this is Ken Adam we're talking about.
It's Ken Adam.
A lot.
All right, so let's look at a very, very simple geometric shape. I wasn't very talented in band, so they let me hit the triangle. Right? And a triangle psychologically gives us power, hierarchy, and threat.
Yeah, I mean, triangles have sharp apexes and corners, and jagged shadows all help us, the audience, prepare for or even expect some upcoming violence. A time when walls and ceilings are more than walls and ceilings. They become predatory and threatening shapes that point directly at the protagonist or the power. So Ken Adam was the production designer for Dr. Strangelove, for instance, in 1964.
Well, and because he was doing that, that's why he didn't work on From Russia with Love.
That's right. Yeah, right. Because he was busy with Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. All right. So in Dr. Strangelove, you've got that famous war room. And this thing is all about geometry. You've got a giant circular table and then a massive triangular ceiling of lights. All these point of light shining down.
Yeah, and there's some great symbolism here. Triangles are inherently aggressive shapes. They suggest command, authority, and danger.
Well, yeah, I mean, even look at military insignias. Many of those use triangles.
Right.
Even the U.S. Space Force, the newest U.S. military branch, it uses the delta, a triangular emblem as the foundational shape for all of its enlisted and officer rank insignia.
Yeah.
So triangles just aren't for movies. They're used in real life.
Yeah, and in the psychological visual design context, triangles are frequently perceived as aggressive because they have sharp points and dramatic or dynamic angles, oftentimes pointing at something that the designers and director want you to notice. So
it's kind of like an arrow. Look here.
Yeah. So, if we notice this, we feel the impact of that discovery. We might feel more tense or more alert as to what may be happening. But this is clever use of geometry.
Oh, it is. And let's take that clever use into the war room, because it's basically a triangle.
Yeah.
And the triangle points downward onto the decision makers. So we can feel the room using the triangle concept. And it's highlighting where the power is. The power is with the people beneath it.
Yeah.
And you can see that the walls are even sloped. Again,
Yeah.
giving these angulars things coming to a point.
Yeah. Now let's look at some Bond stuff. Look at the Spectre boardroom in Thunderball, 1965.
Yeah,
Blofeld sits at the apex above everyone else,
he's Johnny
partially
Carson.
hidden. Yeah, partially hidden. And yeah, the room is arranged in geometric layers. In fact, the entire composition forms a hierarchy. Everyone sitting in their chairs must turn to look at Blofeld. So they visually point toward Blofeld because of his positioning in the room. Lots of squares and rectangles, and the long rectangle that the seats border leads to Blofeld on one end and a screen on the other end. Blofeld controls it all. So the geometry says order and bureaucracy and power, and that power flows from one source. Wow.
And these geometric shapes, these squares and rectangles and triangles, they continue to be used in more Ken Adam movies. Let's keep going with the non-James Bond stuff and then come back to the Bond stuff. There's some stuff we can learn in some other Ken Adam movies around his use of geometry. He didn't just use it for Bond.
All right, let's look at geometric shapes now and how they portray order and bureaucracy. For instance, the Ipcris file, 1965, gives us a good look at this. It's way beyond Bond. The world is full of boxes, grids, rectangular spaces. The enemy isn't a megalomaniac. The enemy is the system itself. The geometry feels bureaucratic and impersonal and institutional. The Cold War machine becomes the villain here.
And I think Ken Adam, as he's doing this in the mid-60s when the Cold War dominated the news, was able to use these geometric shapes to help set power and bleakness. Yeah. And the geometry actually helps expose that.
Yeah, and in the next movie with Harry Palmer, The Funeral in Berlin in 1966.
Again, Ken Adam.
Many interiors are arranged again in rigid rectangular forms. The geometry again reflects a divided Berlin, a visualization of compartmentalized intelligence agencies and rigid political systems. Ken Adam was bringing to light intelligent, meaningful, and powerful sets that described what was really going on in the world and visually portrayed that and gave that to us to see.
Yeah, and I think it's cool how Adam was able to take these fairly simple geometric shapes and bring home the point of this movie. It's pretty cool. Although, Dan, I do have to say, we have to take Luciana Paluzzi's words to heart here when she tells us,
I think you're analyzing this to obsession.
Yeah, yeah, she was good. Check out that podcast. That was a great interview with Luciana. She's a delight. All right, let's keep this geometric shape going. And this time, talking about circles. Circles often indicate control and totality. A circle is endless. And some rectangles do that as well. So we'll look at Dr. No, 1962, for how Ken Adam used circles. Now, first, we remember Professor Dent's visit to Dr. No on Crab Key.
Can't
He
forget
sat
that.
alone in that room with a circular grated hole in the ceiling that sublimely puts Dr. No in control. Large empty floors symbolize vulnerability, the shadow and lighting. What a spectacular set. Everyone could just visualize that right now as we're talking about it. That's how good it is.
Well, yeah, and you're describing it here, and it's a great scene because it's coming back as you're describing it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's such a basic concept. It's stark even, this room is. But it really tells us a lot about what they were going for with the scene.
Yeah.
The set becomes an actor in this scene.
Yeah, I like that.
We don't just get Anthony Dawson's wonderful performance as Professor Dent, but the tarantula is an actor. And very importantly, the set is an actor in this scene, totally setting the mood.
Yeah, I don't think the tarantula got paid that well all the time. So
Probably not. Well, the set didn't either. The set didn't cost a lot.
Dent is intimidated here for a lot of reasons, but the set is one of them. The light and shadows emanating from this circle are also part of this power play, like we said. high contrast lighting on hard gray surfaces that creates this kind of checkerboard morality where the subject is literally being boxed in by the shadows of the architecture that Ken Adam created. And maybe even Dent is being moved around like a checker or a check piece in this set. This is
Well, we
pretty
talked.
good.
Yeah, it is. But we talked about something similar when we talked about Foreign Correspondent and the shadows on the walls and the windmills. These shapes really can have an impact.
Yeah. So in that set, again, with Professor Dent, the power is Dr. No's. All of it.
Yeah, and that's that set here in Dr. No. Let's jump to the reactor room.
Oh, yeah.
This room is in circles. This room is dominated by a rectangular nuclear core, or the pool. It's all about the rectangles here. So there's some symbolism here. Today, this may seem modest compared to later movies. But we have to remember that Dr. No's budgets were tight. So given all this in 1962, in this movie, this was really extraordinary.
It was.
Adam's use of rectangles, like the rectangular consoles, the floor plan, all of that, the slanting columns in this nuclear room of his, they create a sense of an imposing, bigger-than-life menace. It does aid in making it feel futuristic.
And everything revolves around the reactor. And that's key.
Yeah, it is, because everything revolves around Dr. No.
Yeah, I mean, even Bond feels small in this space. We feel small in this space. The vertical scale is immense as well, adding to this sense of Dr. No's power and how diminished a person is standing in this room. This is pure Ken Adam. The room itself tells us that this Dr. No believes he controls forces greater than humanity. That's the essence of this Bond villain.
Well, yeah, and the room physically centers power. If you look at all of the rectangles and how they're all shaped, Dr. No is in control here.
Yeah, I mean, the room suggests scientific mastery. That's what he thought. Dr. No thought he had. Control over nature. That's what Dr. No thought. And that's exactly what Dr. No believes that he possesses, all of these powers. And it's shown in the room.
Okay, so let's move away from the rectangles, because let's go back to the circles. I like circles better than I like rectangles. There's more you can do mathematically with them, I think.
Yeah.
So to do this, let's look at You Only Live Twice from 1967. Again, Ken Adam masterpiece. Blofeld's volcano is a perfect example of how you can take some of these geometric concepts and bring them to life. It's really technological hubris.
Yeah.
Because this lair, the volcanic lair there, it's built around circular platforms in a circular launch area. We have concentric levels, and that just gives us the feeling of danger.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then again, the circle represents to us perfection.
Yeah.
It gives us completion and a sense of control.
It's a perfect shape, a perfect geometric shape. So, like in Dr. No, everything revolves around Blofeld. This is Blofeld's artificial or self-created universe, and he is at the center of it all. And you feel that this is his space. He controls it. The geometry is brilliant. And at $1 million at the time, Ken Adam had to make it brilliant. The geometry screams to us that Blofeld sees himself as godlike.
Well, yeah, this geometry tells us a story, because this interior is not just a circle. It's layered, it's terraced, but everything points to the center. And at the center is Blofeld.
Blofeld, yeah.
The entire structure behaves like a cult temple. It kind of almost foreshadows Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Yeah, it does. And it's not giving us a military installation vibe. It's more of a temple vibe, like you said. And Blofeld isn't merely commanding operations here. He's positioning himself as a god. And that's why this set works. It is immense, and everyone is dwarfed in this except Blofeld. Right.
Okay, so Dan, let's do some shout outs here. Talk about some of the listeners who gave us feedback on some of our recent episodes.
Yeah, on the American Bonds episode, which we just put out recently with Ellen J. Porter, Jim Phelps said, "Hey, another great Tuesday. Short, concise questions, and you let your guests do the rest. Keep it up, fellas." Hey, thanks, Jim. We appreciate your constant feedback. We love it. And then Pietro Rossi gave us feedback again, saying, "Hey, another good podcast and some food for thought." We like when we get people thinking. So thanks to all who provide feedback. It helps us create more episodes that you will enjoy. So thanks, and keep it coming.
All right, so now let's look at the monumental verticality.
Wow, that's a bit. Those are big words.
Hey, you look at a thesaurus and come up with something sometimes. And how does this create or visually depict this God complex you're talking about here? And not many villains had a bigger God complex than Auric Goldfinger. So let's look at Goldfinger from 1964. Yeah. And we get to one of Ken Adams' greatest achievements. I think the Volcano Lairs is best, but Fort Knox is way up there.
Yeah.
And what's kind of fascinating is if you ask a man on the street, what does Fort Knox look like? They're going to give you an answer. And the answer they're going to give you is from Goldfinger. We have to remember the filmmakers, they never were allowed inside it.
No.
Ken Adam had to invent it for us. And his invention became more famous than reality. Again, when you think of the inside of Fort Knox, you're thinking what Ken Adam did.
Yeah, there's no question. That's people who think they know what Fort Knox looks like, they got it from Goldfinger.
Absolutely.
Without question. Yeah.
And geometry plays a big part here.
Yeah, the gold bars are stacked in precise order, all visible. Perfect symmetry, perfect organization, perfect control.
Yeah, I mean, Goldfinger isn't motivated by chaos here. He's motivated by ownership.
He likes gold. Only gold.
The geometry reflects his obsession. So maybe Luciana should have been saying Goldfinger was obsessed. Yeah. Everything here is arranged, it's measured, it's controlled, just like Goldfinger himself. Mm-hmm. And Ken Adams' use of towering stacks of gold in this set is just fascinating and filled with symbolism.
Yeah, that stacking of the gold, that vertical scale creates awe. Everybody looked at that thinking, wow. The audience feels small, but Goldfinger appears larger than life. Even the camera angles make Goldfinger seem large. You got to pay attention to that when they're showing Goldfinger. They make him look big, and everyone else small.
Yeah, and his obsession literally rises above everybody else.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to You Only Live Twice, 1967. Now looking at the verticality elements. The Volcano Lair is perhaps the greatest villain lair in cinema history. Control towers and elevated command positions dominate the whole volcano set, but the symbolism here is simple. Height equals power. Yeah.
Well, you look at most cathedrals. They're tall, they're big. The height is a big part of that because you're trying to bring in the power of the religious deities or however you want to look at that.
Right. I mean, heroes are often tall and powerful. The set's massive. And here, Blofeld is always physically above others. Again, Blofeld's volcano, this isn't just a set. It's mythology. It's a giant hollow volcano. Rocket launch facilities, monorails, control towers, command centers. All of this brilliantly designed by Ken Adam. Every detail to convince us that Blofeld is the godlike character. Everyone else is below.
Yeah, so Adam gets this design going, and then it's going to be months of construction for them to put it together for us to be able to see it in the movie.
Yeah, no kidding. And it did take months and months. And there were some hiccups in the thing. I remember, and they were nervous about it. I remember they were opening the volcano top one time, and they heard this big creaking noise, and Ken Adam was like, "Oh my God, this is $1 million set. I hope this doesn't crush." And it was some small detail, as it turns out. But yeah, but here's what's important about this: the geometry tells the story again. Geometry reinforces his authority, and the circles around Blofeld and the height of the volcano all supports that. It's just brilliant.
Well, and even the circle at the top of the volcano, the volcano floor that opens up.
Yeah.
It gives us a whole window into even greater heights. We're not just contained into this volcanic lair. We can get out through that portal and see what else is out there.
Yeah, his window to the world.
Yes, his window to the world.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at another Ken Adam design element. And it's a little bit different because we talked about circles and triangles and rectangles and squares and stuff, but it's symmetry.
Okay.
And let's blast off to Moonraker for this discussion.
All right, I get it. All right. Now, of course, we're firmly into the 1970s here. This movie perfectly demonstrates Adam's design philosophy. The space station is highly symmetrical. And we're talking about all these other weird angles and everything else. Now we're talking about symmetry. And what does that mean? Well, symmetry suggests perfection, again, control, and obsession. Drax wants to redesign humanity itself. And the geometry that dominates this movie reflects that desire. Symmetry.
So, if we then look at The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977, we've got to talk about Atlantis, right?
Yeah.
We've got another masterpiece here. We've got a city beneath the sea.
Yeah.
And again, there's symmetry.
You got to notice the geometry. Huge windows, massive open spaces, symmetrical layouts, and Atlantis resembles a futuristic palace, really. And why is this important? Because Stromberg doesn't merely want power. He wants to replace civilization. He wants to recreate the world, basically, under the sea now. Now, the architecture reflects his messianic ambitions. He is the creator, at least in his mind. Oh, man. So, again, the symmetry of his lair reflects his mind.
You've got to love these layers. So, especially in the 60s, Dan, why was geometry the focus? I mean, it did resonate with the audience, and this is smack dab in the middle of the Cold War, but why was geometry the focus? Because the average moviegoer never saw CIA headquarters or Soviet command bunkers, missile silos, intelligence headquarters, secret research facilities, or even Fort Knox. So why is geometry the focus of this design?
Because it really, at the time, you have to look back in the 60s, the Cold War was invisible to most people. Production designers had to invent what hidden power looked like. Most people, like you said, they didn't see any of those things in real life. There were real fears in the world, and spy movies gave visual form to those fears. That's the brilliance of Ken Adam again. For the first time, you're giving visual form to the fears that everyone had. And his sets became symbolic versions of secret power. And again, us, the real people in the world, we have no idea what was going on because the Cold War really was invisible to most people. We didn't know the details and the secrets in the Cold War. The audience wasn't simply watching villains now. They were looking at physical manifestations of Cold War anxiety. That's what they were doing. You're looking at it going, man, we're fearful of all this stuff, and now it's being visually brought to the screen. So geometry became this visual shorthand, basically, to show audiences the tension and fears of the real world now on the screen. And that's why people bought into the reality of what they saw on the screen, because in reality, they didn't know any of this stuff. That's why they believe Fort Knox looks like Fort Knox because of the movie Goldfinger. That's why they believe the war rooms look like this and whatever, because we didn't really know. Nobody knew until we visually saw it on the screen, thanks to Ken Adam.
So let's sum up some of these geometric concepts here. Yeah. We mentioned circles, and they represent control. The impressive circular skylights and oculus windows function as unblinking eyes. They reinforce the theme of all seeing a totalitarian regime. Think of that set in Dr. No with that room with Professor Dent. It totally captures that. The circular seating arrangements in war rooms represent a perverted form of equality where the villain sits at the center of a perfect, inescapable loop of power. Yeah. Or the hollowed-out volcano or the rounded silo creates a sense of vertigo with its height, using curved geometry to strip away the hero's sense of direction and escape.
Yeah. And you got triangles, we mentioned. Again, they represent authority, the pointed threat of the triangle. Ken Adams's use of the acute triangle serves as a visual shorthand for instability and aggression, contrasting the hero's traditional kind of rectangular world in a sense. Deep dives into the iconic triangle briefing rooms where slanted ceilings physically compress the air, forcing the viewer to feel the weight of the authority and the pressure from this authority, whoever that villain is, again, contributes to this concept of the triangle dominating the scene.
Yeah, now we also got the vertical structures, which give us domination. The symmetry gives us the obsession. Diagonals elucid paranoia. And this whole vast scale brings out the concept of megalomania.
I mean, one of the strongest arguments I think we can make after looking at all this is that Ken Adams's visual Lairs were not just architecture. They were these psychological portraits, these visual portraits of the villains. And when audiences entered Dr. No's reactor room, Goldfinger's Fort Knox, Blofeld's volcano, they were not simply seeing a location. They were seeing the villain's mind made physical so that we can literally see it. This is genius when well done, and Ken Adams sets were well done.
Okay, so what I think you're saying here is geometry wasn't just a decoration.
Not at all.
We kind of think that way.
Right.
It's beyond decoration, or it was storytelling. It's a hidden in plain sight type of provocation. We thought those sprawling villain bunkers were just for style, but they were actually designed to trigger our deepest anxieties. From razor-sharp angles to astonishingly perfect symmetry, architecture is used as a weapon to communicate the message. How geometry dictated morality and signaled absolute totalitarian villainy and ruthlessness. And oftentimes, it put our heroes and us as the audience members on our heels.
And it's easy not to pay attention to that when you're watching the movies because you're absorbed into the storytelling. And part of the storytelling is this geometry. So once you start looking for it, you'll realize that some of the greatest Cold War spy movies told their stories through these shapes long before the dialogue even did. So this is pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. Now, we're focused on Ken Adam here, but these concepts hold true going throughout. So you have other important designers who've done work that we all recognize. Sid Kane, Peter Lamont, Dennis Gassner, Richard McDonald. All of these designers took these concepts and put them into their movies.
Yeah, and we know Sid Kane and Peter Lamont worked on Bond movies too.
Yeah.
All right.
This is what Ken Adam did and what some of his secrets were. So it leads to a question of why modern villains lost something with the villains, the geography, and how they were used. Dan, what's changed today?
Modern movies prefer realism. I think that's one of the elements that changes things. Safe houses, warehouses, apartments, offices, it's all understandable. But something was lost, for sure. The classic villain lair wasn't just a location. It added to the storytelling in the old days, with the Ken Adam days. It was psychology, tension, paranoia. That was all made visible through this architecture. The architecture explained the villain before the script did. As he said, a modern office building rarely achieves that. But heck, a volcano does. I mean, simply brilliant. Ken Adam had touched millions of lives with his wonderful work and his architecture. But yeah, modern movies have changed. They're more realistic, and those things aren't as interesting.
Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. Ken Adam once said, quote, as a production designer, you offer a form of escapism that is often more exciting than reality, end of quote.
There you go.
So the next time you watch a Cold War spy movie, don't watch the villain. Watch The Room.
Yeah, look at who stands above whom. Who sits at the center. What shapes dominate the space. Where your eye is directed. Because Ken Adam and the great designers of the spy genre, they weren't decorating sets. They were telling stories through architecture. Their geometry revealed ambition. Their symmetry revealed obsession. Their scale revealed ego. And in many cases, the room told you everything about the villain long before he even spoke a word. That's the hidden geometry of evil. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Ken Adam was the greatest geometrician.
Wow, that's a great word.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. All right, this has been Dan.
And Tom.
And we thank you for spending part of your day with us. Please subscribe to our show before you move on. That really helps us and keeps you in the know. So remember, in espionage, trust no one except us. Hey, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening.